morning, good afternoon, and good night. My name is Marv Fikes Jr. This is Become the Podcast. How do you become anything? You dream, you declare, you commit, and success is your next breath. So I am kind of trapped in my bedroom because there's work being done on the house. And so they're doing some painting. We have two ways in which you can get to the basement where my PlayStation is. And they're both blocked off because they're doing a bunch of painting, and there's ladders everywhere and dust everywhere and plastic everywhere and tape everywhere. So I'm stuck in the room. Simon's taking a nap. So I thought this would be a good idea, a good time to do a podcast. I also had a conversation. It must have been on Monday. Had a conversation on Monday that led to a post today on my Instagram, at Marv Fikes Jr. And so as I began to think about the post, I thought it'd be a good topic today to talk about. So I don't have any notes or anything like that. So I'm just going to kind of talk my way through it, and hopefully it all makes sense, and it provides some value and provides some insight, some perspective on things that could hopefully make you a little bit better, or at least make you aware enough to stop the mind from just functioning on autopilot and actually be present enough to examine oneself to determine if the behaviors that are being produced are actually effective, productive, helpful, so on and so forth. So I was having a conversation with this gentleman, and I know his wife's name, but I can't remember his name. But U of M student, grad student, getting his master's in, I think, English. And he was reading a book about this author who was very outright racist, had some values that weren't very redemptive, and he got into writing, kind of developed a reputation for great writing, but because of his views on race, he kind of got pushed to the outside, and then he ended up going into obscurity and eventually dying alone. But his writing was preserved, and his writing was evaluated and looked at and was celebrated because it was so undeniable. And while there were so many people wanting to discount this man's work because of his views on race, after a while, the critics and the experts and whatnot couldn't deny how special of a writer he was. And so that conversation led to my next statement, which was, sometimes we discount people's genius because of their value system, right? And you could look at somebody like Hitler. He's always the classic example of a person who was obviously had some demons he was dealing with, but he was a great leader. And I think now there's been enough people who have said this to help people recognize that although he may have had a poor value system, when you talk about his ability to lead, he was incredible. Now, what he was leading people to do was evil and bad, but his ability to lead was incredible. And so that conversation led us to all the people in the prison system. Because I said that this guy obviously has a genius level talent. Hitler and also the writer, they both have a genius level talent. And then you look at the people in the prison system who have done bad things or not so bad things, whatever this ended up there. And they too have value. They have value because they all have a genius level talent, and it's untapped. Instead they took a left turn, for whatever reason. But we sometimes assume someone to be worthless or not any good or not of any value simply because of their transgressions, or maybe the fact that we don't like them for whatever reason. Maybe the person can be perfectly fine, has not done anything that we know of that should put them in jail or anything like that, but we could just dislike somebody and based upon our dislike for that person, assume that they have no value. And that's where we kind of left off, and or we just kind of kept circling around those narratives, those stories, and this idea that we have to find the seed of goodness in everybody. Or how about this? It's beneficial, it's good, it's helpful, it's productive, it's effective to find the seed of goodness in everybody. Now, is it easy? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it's definitely one of those things that challenges us. And if we can answer the challenge, we definitely become better people for it. As I was writing my book, one of the things that was given to me was this idea that we all have the good, the bad, the ugly, and the dark within us, right? And when you say good, the bad, the ugly, and the dark, especially the dark is always looked at like bad or evil, dark evil or something like that. And dark doesn't have to be the dark within us, that dark place or that dark energy within us doesn't have to be bad. It just simply is a life force that we all have that it allows us to negate pain, discomfort, stress, fatigue, all of that. It's a place that we probably can't access too much, but when needed, we can go to this place that helps, that gives us an extra boost to get things done. And I always talk about the dark place in reference to women who have had children, especially natural birth. And I always say a woman has to go to a dark place to get that done. When you think about a child, and some women have really big children, really big babies, and we know where that is coming out of. And for a female or for a woman to get that done, and what they have to go through sometimes it's a really quick pregnancy, and sometimes it takes hours. Sometimes women are in labor for who knows how long. And yeah, you have the epidural for the numbness and all that other stuff, but I mean, that's still a very daunting task. Well, I feel like women have to go to another place to get that done. Oh, and let me not forget to mention the women who have a natural birth and don't do the extra stuff, and they just they endure the pain and the time, and they get that done. They have to go to a dark place to get that done. And then we can also think about people who people in the military who have been tortured, who have been captured. Things have happened, and they power through, and they have these stories to tell. And then you think about people who may not be going through any torture or pregnancy, but going through something, whether it's an abusive relationship, it could be mental, physical, it could be a spiritual. Some of these people go to cults. I mean, it's a whole bunch of stories and narratives that we could talk about where people have gone to a dark place. They have had to use their dark energy to get them out of a dark place, right? Now, with that dark energy, sometimes it can go left. Sometimes it can go left. And sometimes people who have been abused, they go to a dark place and they use that dark energy to abuse others. And what happens is that dark energy, it also negates fatigue and stress and pain. It can also negate the ability to empathize. It can negate the ability to love. It basically, that dark energy, all it wants to do is get the job done, and it stops caring about other things. And there's time and a place where nothing else can matter except for me getting the job done, right? And there's other times when other things have to matter. Other things have to matter. But there are times when people have had experiences in life, and they've had relationships, and they've had things happen to them that has triggered off something else in their mind and their brain and their spirit, and they do wrong things. But the point I'm trying to make is that we all have that in us, and we are probably 1, 2, maybe 3 experiences away from being that person as well. No matter, they say, you're 3 bad decisions away from being homeless. You're 3 bad three bad decisions away from, being broke. You know what I'm saying? There's tons of people who are super smart, super good people, but, made a bad decision. That bad decision made another bad decision. That decision made another bad decision. Next thing you know, they're living in their car, or they're living on the street. and you talk to these people and you realize, like, wait a minute, you got a good degree, you went to college, or you did everything, you did things the right way. You were about helping the community and developing people, and you were about being there for other people and supporting other people, and this is where you ended up. Or people who are on drugs, and you're like, man, you're on drugs, how did that happen? And you're like, man, you were doing it the right way. You were caring so much for people and helping so many people out that it became overwhelming, and no one ever told you that you got to take care of yourself first. And you became so caught up in loving everyone else that you didn't love yourself enough to take care of yourself. And now here you are dependent on this drug. This person was also telling me about, he has family members who are missionaries, and they have been kind of conditioned to only to take care of everyone else. And because of it, he's worried about them. He says, although you are missionaries and you're doing the greater good for the people and you're serving God through service itself, but he said, but we were talking about, what if that person's genius level talent isn't to serve, or to serve in a different way, to serve through music, to serve through cooking, to serve through writing, to serve through being a electrician, right? And what must they be going through, knowing that I'm really good at doing this, but this family that I've been brought up in is convinced that this is what we are to do as a family. We are to give, but we have to give in this way. How stressful could that be? Right? How stressful could that be? And how could that impact somebody? How could that mess with somebody, long term? And so here it is. You have all of us have grown up. All of us are born with basically the good, the bad, the ugly, and the dark. And then what kind of impacts the good, the bad, the ugly, and the dark are our life experiences. You know what I'm saying? There's people who have like a great foundation at home and they go left, and there's people who have a very unstable foundation and they go right. But it's very sophisticated and complicated and very difficult to determine, the right amount of, this, that, and the third that can help someone grow and go right every single time. There's no science to it, because if it was a science to it, then we'd all be doing the right thing. And furthermore, there are some people who say there is a science. You go to school, you read books, but some people will say, no, you don't go to school. That's part of the conditioning. So anyway, we're talking about this idea that everybody's got the good, the bad, the ugly, and the dark, and then there's these life experiences that impact this person. And so we don't always know what those life experiences are, but we see the behavior. So I don't know what this person has been through that is committing this crime, that is doing this bad thing to these women or doing these bad things to these men. I don't know, doing these bad things to these kids. I don't know what took place. All I know is what's taking place. I don't know about what inspired the behavior. All I can see is the behavior. And as human beings, we're quick to judge. We're quick to judge, and immediately we'll say, well, man, that person is X, Y, and Z. We'll categorize them, we'll judge them, we'll decide who they are and whatnot. And there's a time and a place to kind of figure out why. And sometimes there's not a time to figure out why. All depending on what the transgression is, we don't care about the why. All we know is wrong, right? But sometimes in doing that, we also decide that this person has no value. This person is worthless because of their act. And again, it can go from the most heinous crime to something that's not a crime at all. It could be a person made a mistake and didn't consider you when you thought you should have been considered, or someone just made a innocent mistake, and all of a sudden the person who did something to someone or some group of people, right? Let's say Hitler, right? So the person who made an innocent mistake, and then there's Hitler, and then there's everybody in between, and all of those people could potentially be written off as worthless. And can all those people can be considered to be void of any goodness or any seed that could potentially help people. There's this concept called the law of the law of polar. Shoot, I can't remember it. There's this universal law, and basically it has the polar opposites. I can't remember it, but basically says there's basically good and bad, and anything can become the opposite. So anybody who's good can become bad. Anybody who's bad can become good. And there are, again, some people who are convinced that based on, how they want to judge people and whatnot, that this person and this transgression, and you can decide there's what levels of transgressions there are, but this person isn't any good. This person is worthless. This person is void of any good seed that is worth saving or acknowledging or watering, right? And just as quickly as you could be on the polar opposite, it's just as fast as you could be on one end of it, you could be on the polar opposite. It's really, everybody's capable of changing and developing both ways. But it's unfair to believe and think that this, just because this person made a mistake, that this person doesn't have any good in them. And I think that's one of the challenges of being a human. You don't have to do anything, but I think it's helpful to believe that, and it's helpful to be aware of, and it's helpful to allow your behavior to be impacted by the notion that there's some good in everybody. There's a seed of goodness in everybody. But I go back to this concept that we all have the good, the bad, the ugly, and the dark within us. But some of us actually experience experiences that trigger the bad and the ugly, and sometimes the dark. And it takes a village to kind of help that person understand this is what you've been through, and this is how it's impacting you, and this is how it's impacting your behavior. And we got to figure out how to help you understand how all these life experiences were actually trying to pull you closer to your purpose so that you could do some good for someone else. That's tough, man. That's tough, because sometimes we bump into people that we can't stand. We can't stand. And we don't even know who they are. We know very little about them. We know very little about them. I was a part of an intervention, and it was a bunch of students who just decided that they didn't care for me, and so they all got together during a meeting to tell me why they didn't like me. Now, they all had reasons why. Some of them were, I'll say some of them were valid. Some of them were just flat out BS. But the thing is, no one ever talked to me about them. They just decided that I heard this about him. I'm gonna water it. I'm gonna water it and let it fester, and in hopes that it will surpass my subconscious and it will become a part of my subconscious. It will pass my conscious and become a part of my subconscious. So like it's so real that I don't even have to think about it in order for it to be real. Like it's real. It's no longer even intentional. Like this is just how I am. You know what I'm saying? Like I truly believe that this person is a bad person. And so my comeback while I was being talked to by these kids, I said, but how come you guys, if you had issues, how come you never told me? How come you never told me? And one guy in the group says, basically, if we had told you what our struggles were or why we were upset with you, would it have even mattered? And basically he was saying, there's no good seed in you at all. So why should I even water you with any grace? Because there's no seed to water. It'd be like going outside and watering the dirt. Like this dirt, soil. There's no seed of any sort. You're just going to water dirt. It'll just become mud. Right? So basically that guy was saying to me, what's the point of me watering your seed? What's the point of me watering you? You don't have anything to water. What's the point? And the reality is we all have a seed of goodness. We all have something to water. We all have something to water. Now, can't come up with a good analogy for this one, but not everybody wants you to water their seed. Not everybody wants you to water their seed, meaning not everybody wants your consideration. Not everybody wants your belief in them. Some people simply like being mad. Some people simply like being upset. Some people simply like being disgruntled. Some people simply like being evil and mad at the world, and they like being a victim. They love tragedy. They like being tragic. They enjoy it. To be tragic is a lot easier, because the second that you start to identify that there's something to appreciate about struggle, number one, but two, the second that they realize that my happiness is actually all on me, it's not on anybody else, it's on me. Now they then become accountable for how they perceive life. See, if I never ever accept that I am responsible for my happiness, and if I never ever accept the reality that I can make things better, I have this power that I've given to people that I can actually reclaim. If I never have to acknowledge that, then I can continue moving in life as though I can move in life with the belief that everything that everything is coming after me, that life is beating me down, and it's unfair. And because it's unfair, I am justified. My behaviors are justified. I can now be mean to people. I can now act as though there's no reason in looking for the goodness in people, because there is no goodness. I can do that because life is unfair. So if life is unfair, right? If life is completely 100% unfair, then I can now go looking for telling everybody how bad they are and be justified. But the second that I find out, I realize that, hey, actually, I'm responsible for my happiness and there's some goodness in people. Now I got to look for it. And if I'm looking for it, then that must mean that I believe that there's some goodness in this person. And if I believe that, now I have to accept it. I have to explore it. So some people are like, "No, man, this is way funner. This is way easier." Yeah, half my days are terrible. Yeah, I don't often like the way, life shapes out for me, but it's a lot easier than trying to find the good in people, especially the people I've been mean to, especially the people who have been mean to me, especially the people who haven't said things exactly the way that I would like them to be said to me, especially for the people who I decided to make it tough on. Yeah. I'd much rather keep up this craziness. I'd much rather have a problem with somebody and not address it, not talk to them about it, so that they are totally incapable of making any adjustments. I don't want that person to make the adjustments, because if that person makes the adjustments, then I have to accept and acknowledge that, damn, this person actually has some good in them. Now what am I going to do? What am I going to hate now? Because the one thing that I hated the most made an adjustment, and I have to acknowledge that there's some good in that person. And that's what I mean by some people don't want their seed to be watered. Some people, and some people have been doing this song and dance for so long, they are convinced, they believe it. And that's where you have these people who kill people and people who do mean things to people, and they torture people and they abuse people because in their head, this is right. They've conditioned themselves to believe that the world is unfair. Now I'm in my dark place. Now I don't care about life. I don't care about the idea people are good. Now I just want to, I just want to make things right somehow. I just want to make things right, and I'll make things right by hurting other people in a variety of ways. It could be through words, it could be through neglect, and it could be through something that's physical, something that's spiritual, something that's mental. So it's tough, but I think it's a responsibility we have as conscious humans, as humans that are awake. Gotta look for the good in people. Everybody's got something in them. When the last time you went to the mall and you were going past the area where the kids play, right? They got that little play area for the kids, and you just looked at kids and just said, and you could just look at a kid and be like, that kid's evil, that kid's mean. Yeah, we do pass our spirit along as parents. Yeah, you can set your kid up and have them watching certain shows, certain movies. You can use certain language around them. You can let them hear certain music, right? There's some things that you can do to make sure that your kid, it goes left, right? But then there's all these other experiences, that they're going to encounter. And that's going to have an impact on how they show up. That's going to have an impact on how they grow up. But no kid just comes out just mean. You look at you could go to any jail in the world, if you could go back in time and look at that kid from ages, from a few months to age 3, that kid just wanted to be loved. That kid just wanted to be helped and held and kissed. That kid just wanted to be embraced. And that kid was willing to give so many people so many chances. Think about it. Think about a young kid who's 2, who's 3, who's being neglected and being abused. And at the drop of a dime, that kid would be willing to forget everything and forgive. I think about the moments in which I've had to spank my children. And later that day, I could get a kiss and a hug from that child or my child, because that's all they want. But when they get abused, or when they get neglected, or when they have just enough bad stuff happen to them, something turns off. And now that seed is still there, but that genius level talent, that purpose, that passion, that sometimes gets negated. And that genius becomes untapped, and they never are able to get back to it. Some people never even recognize that it's even there. And you wonder, what would life be like if all those people who are going through it could just recognize that they have a purpose in life that makes them valuable, and because of that value, they would maybe think, you know what, I can't do these bad things because I can't do these bad things to these 2 people or these 3 people, because there's a million of people who need my services. So I'll conclude by saying this. It's not easy. I myself am working on it. I have my ways. When I don't like somebody, I stay clear from them. I stay away from them. I act like they don't exist. In the privacy of my own home, I may talk about them or joke about them or laugh about them, so I can kind of level the playing field. If they're being evil to me and I'm not saying anything to them, I may go home and make jokes about them so I can feel, I can have some fun with it. And we all have our different, our little vices that we need to kind of deal with people, our little ways in which we deal with people. Sometimes we do it in the privacy of our own home. Sometimes we do it out in public. But I'm working on it too. And I realize that everybody's got a seed of goodness in them. And the best thing that you can do is, be patient with them. But you got to have balance. At some point, you got to know when to move on. You got to know when to disconnect. You got to know when to disconnect. You got to, with all that, you got to, with all that you dislike about that person or whatever, you got to be able to just at least in some way tell them, like, can I talk to you for a little bit? Can we rap for a little bit? I've been struggling with this, man, and give that person water that person with some honesty, with some transparency, and just see. And you might find that person may now connect with you. Might not connect with everybody else, but they might connect with you, and then hopefully you can get that person to kind of see what you saw in them. Now that person may see that in other people. And again, it might not work. Some people simply don't want to be watered because they have convinced themselves of this alternate truth. But try your best. Try your best. Do your best. And then see what happens. Hopefully I didn't put you to sleep. Again, Simon's asleep. He's next to me. He's sleeping. I was trying to speak quietly. But I'll finish up. Greatness lives on the edge of death. I am not afraid to die. I will fight for my brother. I will fight for my dreams. I will celebrate my dreams, and I will die for my dreams. Thoughts are things, and everything starts off as a thought first and springs from a place of mindfulness and clarity. There is a seed of goodness in everyone. Work on watering that seed. I'm Mark Fikes Jr. Done.